Why are people dying for a cool vacation photo? We're talking about the psychology of selfies with Dr. Sarah Diefenbach at the Ludwig-Maximilians University of Munich, and the French have an answer for the feeling that makes people do stupid things. Hi everybody, I'm Joe Bauer, and welcome back to Travel Tomorrow, the podcast about what's new and what's next in travel. That's two things. I'm joined by my co-host, Alicia Underly Nelson. How are you doing, Alicia?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
That's it? This is our opportunity to catch up, and you're just doing all right? You're doing fine?
No, I'm doing okay.
You don't want to elaborate? You always want to elaborate. How are you not elaborating right now?
Because it's been a long week, so that's probably part of it. Lots of deadlines, getting the pre-Thanksgiving stuff in, and I've been busy learning Norwegian.
As one does.
Yes, my Norwegian has progressed from sitting stupidly and nodding and understanding words like kid and food to spitting out words that are incorrect and awkward and sound a little bit like mumbled German.
I do think that's cool, genuinely cool that you're learning Norwegian. But I did have to bite my tongue when you said something about sitting there and nodding stupidly. And I really had to bite my tongue to say, well, I know you would be really good at that. But then I thought I'd maybe sound a little mean. And I don't know if people would know that I would say that out of at least much love as I'm capable of.
That's how we show our affection. So I think if you lead with that, people will understand.
Perfect. Well, so the next time you lead in with a story that you're sitting and smiling stupidly and nodding your head, I'll feel more comfortable jumping on that.
I'll allow it.
So what am I doing? What's new with me? Thanks for asking, Alicia.
I am. I was. So now you're not going to tell me either?
You didn't ask me. You said you were asking me.
I asked you twice already. Fine. What's new with you, Joe?
Oh, nothing.
Mm-hmm. Why don't you tell us what you're really up to?
So nothing's really new with me. I've tried changing locations within the temporary Berlin apartment that I have, so hopefully it's a little less echoey than it was last time. I was not happy with that kitchen echoey-ness. But what's really going on in Berlin is that we are celebrating the 30th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. And yesterday was the 81st. Well, yeah, we're recording this on Sunday, so little context. Yesterday, Saturday, was the 81st anniversary of Kristallnacht. So it's been kind of a weird mix of actual jubilation for a good thing that happened, and not as much as last year when it was the 80th anniversary, a little bit bigger of a number, but solemn reminders of what happened on 81 years ago on Kristallnacht. So it's been kind of a weird juxtaposition of commemoration going on in Berlin this weekend.
Yeah, no kidding. Those are really like a lot of somber things to ponder.
I don't want to get you too caught up on somber pondering. I know how much you can ponder hard, and you can get real earnest real quick. So I don't want to leave that hook out too long. I know you'll take that bait.
I know that's probably a wise impulse.
Well, so then why don't we stop talking about ourselves and get on over to our first stop today?
Now boarding.
This April, reporter Catherine Miles wrote about a strange phenomenon for Outside magazine. She reports that between 2011 and 2017, 259 people died while taking photos, often in dangerous, remote, natural places. And this is the kind of story that I can recall hearing about kind of in fits and starts. It would show up in Google Alerts, or I would read about it in the travel writing community. And the first time that it really registered as a concern for me was when I heard that a pair of travel bloggers had died after taking a selfie after falling off of a rock outcrop at Yosemite. And then it seemed like once that happened, I was hearing stories about it everywhere. And that's something that this reporter had sort of noticed too, that everywhere we were hearing that people were getting too close to the edge of cliffs. A man from Macau fell 1,000 feet into the Grand Canyon. YouTubers died in a waterfall in British Columbia, and even just ordinary people who weren't documenting what they were doing for social media were getting caught climbing into zoo enclosures and taunting the animals and jumping park barriers and going off the trail to stick their hands into boiling geysers at Yellowstone, and all these things that you'd think if we used our common sense, we wouldn't even be remotely tempted to do. But it seemed like everywhere we went, we were hearing these stories. And Catherine kind of dug into that a little bit and learned that it's maybe a little bit more complicated than it initially seemed. We can share that story in the show notes, but it really got us thinking about, are we just, because of the internet and because we live in a connected world, are we hearing more about these stories? Or is there something about social media and something about this incredible desire to document the way that we travel and to show off the places that we are? And is there something about the nature of taking photos themselves, and specifically about taking a selfie, that kind of takes us out of the moment and leaves us really vulnerable to hurting ourselves or doing something stupid or taking risks that we wouldn't ordinarily do?
You know, my first thought when coming across these stories was to admittedly chuckle a little bit and think of this as some kind of Darwinian award or whatever. Like, they have those Darwin awards for the people who die in the stupidest ways. Thank you for removing yourself from the gene pool kind of deal. But then looking into this more, I realized that people have been doing something to this effect for centuries, not necessarily having an iPhone in hand to snap a photo of themselves wherever the hell they are, but whether it's, you know, doing a painting or commissioning a painting, rather, wanting to capture themselves in some kind of cool moment. The thing that seems to change is that maybe the ante is getting a little bit higher, because I don't remember seeing any paintings of, you know, during the Renaissance, of somebody hanging on the edge of a cliff for 10 hours while somebody, you know, got the contour just right for the painting.
Yeah, it's like we demand more and more interesting locations, and we want to push our limits, and all of that, I think, is a really good impulse in some ways, because it gets us out of our comfort zone. But I think it does seem like, yeah, we're maybe taking unnecessary risks that we don't need to take, or we're seeing other people doing things that maybe we haven't seen before, so they're becoming normalized in a way that we're not aware of before. Like, before, we wouldn't even think that it was possible maybe to go to a certain place or to take a particular photo on the edge of a cliff, because it just wasn't on our radar. It wouldn't show up in a book. It wouldn't be in a painting. And if we didn't know somebody personally who'd done it, we would never know. And even if we did know somebody that had taken that risk, how would they document it? They just have to tell us. But yeah, is there something about a picture? Is there something about a selfie that makes us respond differently? I mean, it's something that I think when you start to hear more than one or two of these stories, you really do start to wonder, like, are people just dumb? Are there more dumb people? Or are these sort of feeding each other in a way that they wouldn't have fed before? That doesn't really make sense. You know what I mean?
I have a pretty astute getting through the weeds. Alicia doesn't make sense, right? I don't know if everybody else does, but no, I think your point comes through. But what I've also kind of understood early on while doing this show with you, and only into our 5th episode, is I don't know a whole lot about a lot of things. And that's why, to learn more about why humans are so into documenting themselves and their lives to the point of risking their life to get that photo, I interviewed Dr. Sarah Diefenbach, professor for market and consumer psychology at the Ludwig-Maximilians University of Munich, who, along with her colleague Laura Christoforikos, published a 2017 study detailing over 200 subjects' experience with selfies. Dr. Diefenbach was kind enough to make time for me on a Saturday morning with a newborn in tow, no less. So I jumped right into our conversation, asking what she meant in her research when she called selfies a double-edged phenomenon.
On the one hand, you could say that selfies are a wonderful way to share what is happening in your life, to stay in contact with your family and friends, and it's even more direct, you could say, than a non-selfie picture. But on the other hand, in our research, we found that people, are nerved by selfies because there are too much selfies. And one very interesting thing is that they see selfies as a way of self-presentation and as a narcissistic thing. So the impression you make when you are sending selfies to your friends is maybe another one than you assume.
Exactly. Yeah. You brought, I saw that point brought up in your research about how we judge our own selfies in a different way other people judge selfies. Can you talk a little bit about that dichotomy?
Yeah, exactly. So what we did was that we gave some rating scales to our participants, and the interesting finding was that the own selfies were rated as funny, ironic, authentic, but the selfies of others were rated as self-presentational. And so if everybody thinks about the same way about this phenomenon, then yeah, we are all making a self-presentational on others, but may think it is funny or it is ironic. Yeah.
So that's a little bit about why or how other people might perceive somebody taking a selfie. Did you come across anything positive any positive aspects about taking selfies that may be overlooked by people?
Yeah, of course, there were single positive aspects, and there's also a lot of literature, for example, seeing selfies as a new form of arts. So, of course, you can make, very interesting arty pictures with it. Or, as I already mentioned, you can give others a more direct insight about what is happening in your life. But at the same time, it happens that you miss out the other views. For example, there are very few landscape pictures because everybody is taking pictures where a large part of the picture is covered by you in the center. And so you don't get that big insights about what's happening around you anymore.
And that must be part of it too, right? It seems that people are taking selfies to better curate or show off what they want their life to look like to people, and they're not taking those moments that might not be as exciting, like talking to a guy on a podcast on a Saturday morning.
Yeah. Exactly. So it's a really selective picture or insight you get into other people's lives, and it's all made. It's a bit artificial what you see, because it's really I mean also social media like Instagram and these video stories and all this stuff, this is supporting this trend that it's a presentation you're giving to others and not insight into real life.
And have you noticed a difference in how people take selfies in their everyday lives versus while traveling?
Yeah, of course. I mean, while traveling, I think it always has been connected to this idea that you give some presentation to others when you are back, and this is a nice thing. I mean, this is what you are doing also, and I scrolled to some reports on your blog, and that's really great. So I think for traveling, there's a stronger connection to this idea of documentation, and also in the moment while being there, thinking about how you could present this to others later. But again, with this special type of selfie pictures, there's the risk that you're in a way missing the typical things of the landscape of the cities of whatever where you are traveling, and that you yourself, so the person, is the center of it, which of course is a different story you are then telling. And another thing which I find a bit sad is that sometimes people also lose the sense of being in the moment and really enjoying the traveling, because all the traveling is planned around taking pictures, and you're not thinking anymore which way would I enjoy the most, but where could I take the most perfect pictures, and where would I look the best in the surrounding, where will I get the most likes on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. So I think it's a trade-off a bit.
Absolutely. And you also mentioned a little bit about presentation. I also saw in your research that you noted some troubling trends in terms of how Instagram selfies are contributing to a woman's dissatisfaction with their weight and overall image, and the way, I think you said, children under 3 years of age are able to recognize, when it's time to pose. The camera's looking at me and I got to smile. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, of course, that's a trend. I mean, this body image satisfaction thing, that is one topic. So that I mean, it's nothing new. You already had this in magazines, that you're seeing models and you are getting strange idea of how you should look like. And of course you have this in digital media too, and the way to edit pictures is of course much easier now. But another thing what you just mentioned is that really already small children are trained to pose, and so you are learning in a way that natural pictures are not good enough, but you have to make some artificial pose for it or edit those pictures. So it's I think a problematic message which you're sending. And then in addition, I think it's also really sad, because in a way all these pictures look the same. People are learning one pose and then they have this pose on every picture wherever they are. And so if you're scrolling to the pictures of one person, it really sometimes you have the idea that you could just take the same picture and just change the screen or the background. And I think the wonderful thing about taking natural pictures, that you really get an idea of how people interact with each other, how they are looking when they're not aware of being photographed. This is vanishing, and I think that is really, really sad.
It sounds like, because of your research, that your son is never going to become an Instagram influencer, because you're going to notice these signs early on if he starts trying to pose for the camera or demanding trips to Legoland so he can get some likes.
I guess, yes.
I also want to talk about something else I noticed in your research. You talked about inauthentic versus authentic selfies, and I was wondering if you could spell out some of the ingredients of what makes an authentic and an inauthentic selfie.
I mean, this is hard to define, of course, because we were just asking for ratings. But when you think about it, for example, you could say that an authentic selfie is maybe one where you just do one selfie and then use this one. But I heard that many people do many selfies one after another, and then they pick the perfect or the most perfect picture. And I think this is then more inauthentic, because it's not anymore these first moment snapshot, but it's something that you have created. And then if you start editing these pictures, if you start, for example, moving things around you and really controlling how you look the best with the background. I mean, this can be a very nice picture, and sometimes you want to have such beautiful pictures to hang it in your room or something, but it's not this authentic thing.
I mean, I've definitely seen or had this idea of people look very egocentric when I'm sitting there. And I was actually in Portugal relatively recently, and sitting alongside the coast and seeing all these people gathering, taking multiple selfies, and just thinking, like, my God, like, why are you even here? But then I'm sure I've been seen taking selfies thinking like, oh, what I'm doing is cool and ironic, and other people looking at me saying, oh, what the heck?
Yeah, but that's exactly what we mean with the selfie paradox, that you always have this feeling, but for me it's something different. So you're seeing all these people and think, oh, what the hell are they doing? Are they not aware how crazy this is? But then if yourself are in the exactly same situation, then you have this feeling, oh, but this selfie, and everybody will be glad about if I'm sending this selfie. And I mean, also me, I'm taking selfies from time to time, but it's interesting to have this contradictory perceptions. And that in our research we also found that really a large part of people, I think nearly 80%, wished for less selfies and more normal pictures in social media, but at the same time the same part of people is taking selfies regularly. So everybody is contributing to a phenomenon that nobody really wants.
And I also want to talk a little bit about when selfies go wrong. Some people have called them killfies, this trend of people dying while trying to get a perfect selfie, usually among more adventurous Instagrammers. Have you come across anything in your research that explains why people are willing to put themselves in such risky situations for just a selfie?
Oh yeah, that's really crazy, and I can just guess that they are not aware of the risk because it's yeah. I mean, it's just a part of the normal life to do pictures, and then maybe you're so focused on taking this picture that you really are not aware of the real risk that's around you. And then of course there are also cases where people do roof climbing or something, and then they make a selfie of it. So even the activity itself, it's already very risky, and then the ambition to document it and to document it with a selfie is then what comes on top, and sometimes ends deadly.
Right. And a lot of people are emulating dangerous selfies they've seen Instagrammers do. I'm wondering if you think Instagrammers have an obligation to share with their audience the precautions they took to stay safe, or should it just be pretty intuitive that if you're hanging off the edge of a cliff, it's pretty dangerous?
I think it should be pretty intuitive. I mean, you could say that they could give some caution instructions, but I don't think that would really change a lot because, I think you are aware of it, and and it's some way of competition. I mean, you also have this apart from selfies, that people are doing risky things, and you can be more outstanding if you do more risky things. But of course, this trend to present it in social media has increased the competition, because you're not just competing with your peers, but with the whole world, more or less. And so of course it's the risk is getting higher and higher, because you always have to be more special and do more risky things to still get attention, and attention is a very rare good in the internet.
I feel like if you were to sit people down and have them write down the worst case scenario of taking a dangerous selfie, I die, and best case scenario, I get a bunch of likes, they'd see it's not worth the risk. Have you come across anything explaining why our brains are blocking out such an obvious worst case scenario in favor of something that, in the grand scheme of things, is just an extra dessert at the end of a meal?
Yeah, really, really good analogy. I think it's in these cases not only the selfie. I think the people also like the risk itself. I mean, people are also doing extreme sports which are very risky, and they did this even before the selfie era. So I think it's not the only factor that plays in here. But then of course, if you put it besides, it's really ridiculous to take such a risk for just some likes. But yeah, I think the social media are full of these contradictions. I mean, also without such risky pictures, I would ask people, is it really worth to spend your life to your Instagram followers? I mean, there are so many people which are not thinking about what they personally enjoy anymore, but just what gets the most likes, and they are taking the pictures that get the most likes. They are going to places where they think they can take pictures that get the most likes. They have devoted their whole life to this, and even there, I would say it's a not so good trade-off.
So, Alicia, I've been wanting to ask you, have you ever put yourself in danger for a selfie?
Not for a selfie, but I have had a moment, ironically, while I was pondering this exact topic for this episode, where...
See, I knew you loved pondering.
I do, indeed. And I was actually thinking about this. I was actually thinking about if it's distraction that makes people take these risks, or if they're thinking ahead, or they're talking to somebody, you know, kind of what the elements are that literally make people fall off a cliff. And would that happen if they didn't have a camera in their hand? So I was thinking this, and I was actually in the Badlands of Western North Dakota photographing the Matahay Trail for a shoot. And it was one of those things where I had a limited amount of time. I was literally racing sundown because I was doing this assignment while I was also speaking at a conference, so I had a limited amount of time. And I was in a place that I was really familiar with. I had hiked and biked this section of the trail before, and it wasn't particularly hazardous. And it was in a grassland section, and I'm a prairie person, so I think we're maybe a little more on our guard when we're on a cliff. We're not as I personally don't pay attention as much when I'm on what feels like solid ground. And I had a camera in my hand, not taking a selfie, but taking pictures of signage and trail markers and that, and vegetation and that sort of thing, and literally walked into a gopher hole and twisted my ankle and thought, okay, like I've been judging people super harshly and thinking, like you said, like, well, maybe if you're dumb enough to hurt yourself while taking a picture, you shouldn't be taking the picture at all. And I thought, wow, here I am doing the exact thing that I literally just judged somebody for doing. So, yeah, I'm pretty self-aware when I'm taking selfies, but apparently when I'm on location for a shoot in a rush, I'm not super self-aware. So have you ever had a moment like that, like where you're shooting for yourself or someone else, or you're writing or your mind's elsewhere and you've thought to yourself, wow, that was close?
Well, first off, I just want to say that as much as we poke each other, I am truly glad that you were not lost too early from this world due to a tragic gopher hole accident.
Thank you. It would have been a giant bummer if I would have broken my ankle and been stuck in the middle of nowhere after literally just interviewing a park ranger about people doing dumb things and going out and not telling people where they are and being unprepared. Yeah. She would have not been impressed with me after, and I would have not been impressed.
It just seems like a Looney Tunes saying that you would have just like zipped down the hole or something.
Yeah, it was a humbling experience.
I would say that has to be pretty humbling. But yeah, so have I ever done this? I have not put myself in danger for a selfie. The closest I've ever gotten, it was not a selfie. This is actually slightly before I think selfies really took off. I was in Ireland on the Cliffs of Moher. Mm-hmm. And there's a section where you have to pass a border that says something to the effect of, don't cross this border, there's no more railing, people die. So you know what people do, to the point of, you were saying earlier, thinking that, you know, people are dumb. People are dumb. I do think that people, on the whole, can be pretty dumb. And I followed the cattle line along with them, hopped over the fence and said, don't cross this line, people die. And there's just a whole long row of people going along the cliff of the Cliffs of Moher, where, you know, you peek down, it's immediate death. I didn't take a selfie, but I was trying to seem, I don't know if cool is the right word, but I was trying not to show my colors, that I was feeling a little nervous about this experience. I was with a buddy of mine. We were walking along this edge, and we were going to take a picture. I would take a picture of him, he'd take a picture of me, and I crawled on my belly to the edge because I was so terrified, like, because it's really windy over there. So I'm crawling on my belly in these medium high grasses, and I strike this like silly model pose, like trying to present this aura that I'm in on the joke, everything's okay, but really I am scared shitless that I'm gonna fall off this cliff. I had just met the woman who would go on to be my wife like a few weeks earlier. So after having that experience, coming away from the cliff, I had loved the trip in Ireland. I wanted to do so much more traveling in the world that it's never worth the risk of going to the edge of some cliff or doing whatever for a selfie. Once selfies became a thing. I guess the other point to make too is that everybody who takes these risky selfies, so many other people have done the same thing, right? It's very rare that you find a risky selfie that was purely unique. Some people do that, and they are some of the ones who we later unfortunately find out have died from trying to get that selfie. But so many selfies that are risky that are people just emulating other selfies. So for me, I know I'm not the guy who's going to be climbing a building, dangling from off the edge and taking a selfie and getting 1 million likes or whatever on Instagram. I also don't care to do that. So for me to emulate somebody else. There's just no incentive there. I came across that situation in Jordan, and a guy took me to this off the official trail in Petra, where they have the treasury, which is this famous monument cut into the side of rock that was made famous in the West in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And we're already have gone through some pretty sketchy areas in terms of, one false step and you're done, to the point where I was like, this isn't worth it. I'm turning around. And he eventually found another way. And so we get to this spot that I was like, oh, I recognize this. I've seen this on Instagram 100 times. It's the photo of the treasury from high above. So most people, just like normal people, stay on the ground. You stay on the ground, you walk up in front of it, take your picture, and you go around, and it's incredible. But for some, I guess that's not enough, and you go up at high above, and you sit on the edge, and you dangle your feet off the edge, and then the guide or something takes a photo of you as you're on the edge. And I inched a little bit close to the edge, but it just wasn't worth it to me. I've seen that image so many times that what the hell do I have to add by risking my life to just be another photo that somebody scrolls through on Instagram? So no, I had not actually really come into harm's way for a selfie.
I think it's interesting that you talked about feeling like it was a risky hike, because you're fairly expert as a hiker. I mean, you have experience with it. And in my talks with, I've talked to outdoor guides and I've talked to park rangers, because they all have stories of people going out a 14-mile trail with no water and sandals. People going out with just no idea of what the sun can feel like, or the fact that there isn't water on the trail, or they go out expecting bathrooms, or they go out in clothing that's not appropriate at all. And they maybe ignore some of those things where they think, "Ooh, this is steep," or like, "This is going to be a rough climb down," or "I'm not sure how I feel if that's sturdy enough to try." And they were saying that sometimes they feel that because people see these photos, they think, "Oh, lots of people have gotten here." And my favorite, Instagram influencer, she seems like she hikes all over the world in cute little outfits, so it can't be that hard if she did it. But what they don't realize is people might be bringing special outfits or spreading a picnic there. Like they're bringing that up in a backpack. They're not just walking with a bottle of wine in their hand on this easy trail, and they kind of don't pay attention to their intuition, or they don't know to look for the signs. And they were saying that so much of the time it's not that people are stupid, it's that they're very uninformed, and they might see something in a magazine or they see something online and they think, "Oh, this should be easy," not realizing that, people that stage photos for a living, whether they're an Instagrammer or a photo editor, it doesn't necessarily effortlessly happen. And it takes a team to make these things happen. And they've seen that it's not so much that people are taking dumb risks, that they truly don't understand what actually is entailed. And they will say that people will come for 10-mile hikes, just ignoring what they're told to bring, because they think, "Oh, it doesn't seem like it's that hard. It seems pretty easy." Well, sure, it seems really easy at the
But don't you think that's stupid? You're saying that it's not that people are stupid, they're just going into something unprepared. Don't you think that's inherently stupid if somebody is getting the warning sign saying this is harder than it looks like in the photo, and they're still going forward with it? That to me screams a little dumb.
Yeah, probably. I did talk to a guide in Montana that said that she thinks it's more that people they're incredibly optimistic. They'll be like, "Oh, I never get cold. I don't need an extra layer." But she's like, "No, I'm telling you, like, I will not allow you to come with us unless you have these things." And she said that people will challenge her on it, and of course they do end up getting cold, because she knows, when you stop moving, it's colder. When we hit this elevation, it's colder. When we go this distance,
that strikes me as stupid.
Not wearing the proper gear, you will get cold. She does this for a living, and she says so much of the time, people they're stubborn. They think they know best, and when they get out of their comfort zone, they go for optimism, which is not necessarily a great thing for human evolution. It sounds like your pessimism is probably better in the long run.
Or just a little bit more caution. Yeah, that sounds like stupidity to me. If you're ignoring the warning signs of an expert and think that you can just be optimistic about making it through a dangerous situation. And now that I feel like we're going full circle, you're saying it's not good for human evolution. That's basically the concept of Darwin Awards is maybe it is good for human evolution. You're weeding out the people who are just blindly ignoring the experts and putting themselves in danger. I know I wouldn't necessarily want to pass those genes along, but I feel like we should get moving on to language love because we got a word this time that feels pretty apt for what we're talking about.
Blah 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 blah.
Yes, today's phrase is l'appel du vide, which is French for the call of the void. And that sounds very esoteric and beautiful and terribly French, but it's really based on a very real phenomenon. It's defined also as that feeling you get when you're on the edge of a cliff, and if you don't have the impulse that you had, Joe, where you want to pull back, it's the impulse where you think, I'm going to go a little bit closer and see what happens, or that urge to turn the steering wheel into traffic at the last minute. It's something that you see in kids a lot. On that same trip to the North Dakota Badlands, I saw a little boy literally run up to the edge of a bluff, like full speed. And you could tell, like, he just like, cool, let's fly. He got this look in his eye. And I think that we learn to control that, most of us, as we get older, but we never really outgrow it because when I was looking up this word online and looking for real life examples, there were lots of them. And it's a really, really, really common feeling. And it happens whenever you sort of have to scold yourself. It's also the urge, like you take a pan out of the oven and you think, I'll just grab it. And you have to tell yourself, no, wait. It's that little, that check in your head where you have to tell yourself, no, don't jump, don't touch. And it's fascinating because it's so real. And I think so much of that goes to that optimism that we were talking about. People thinking like, ooh, let's try it. What's the worst that could happen? As we learned today, the worst that could happen is really bad sometimes.
Yeah, you die. Except I do grab the pan right out of the oven with my bare hand because it builds up like a nice callus. And so that becomes very handy when having to pick up other hot things around the kitchen.
Call of the void has a hold on you. It doesn't work for you with heights, but it works with heat.
You know, honest to God, it actually, so this is the thing, like, I don't feel the pull to go to the edge for a photo because that gratification doesn't work for me because I know I can tell that I'm not going to get that social media gratification if I go to the edge and take the photo, but I'm also keeping myself away from the edge because I certainly do feel that pull when I'm on the edge to be like, what would it be like if I just, fell right now? Or if I am, I don't know, cycling, I might be riding my bike and be like, what it would be like if I just like took a really hard turn and what would happen. So for better or worse, I actually do feel that urge sometimes. And perhaps that's also why I try to talk myself back away from the edge because I don't want my animal brain to make me do something stupid.
And that's exactly what it is, isn't it? Like I was in Puerto Rico once and we had this crazy time. We'd been on a ferry, so we'd been to the ocean and we'd gone into the jungle and there was this waterfall that you could like slide down. It was sort of like a natural water park and they had shut it. I mean, it was never something that was official, but we got word that the cops had been there because the water was too high and they had to take people out. And so, like, I knew this and, like, look, I'm a good swimmer. I've never been afraid of water. And my brain was like, oh, this looks so amazing. Like, I want to do it. I want to do it so much. And my husband was like, please do not make me tell your mom that you died on your birthday. Like, is this really worth doing this right now? And I'm like, yeah, but when else am I going to get to jump off a water slide on my birthday? And he was like, no. And, like, it scared me a little bit because if he wouldn't have been there, I totally would have done it. Like, what is that? It's just like you said, it's that animal part of our brain that I don't know if it's stupidity or if it's just this crazy feeling of risk, but I think as humans we seek it. It's that feeling on the like the fair ride or the roller coaster, where your stomach drops out a little bit. Like, but I think just because we crave that, man, like doesn't mean that we should go after it though. But I don't know. It's a balance.
I personally think you should have taken the leap because clearly the thing that's most dangerous for you is gopher holes.
Clearly. I know. That's how I'm going to hurt myself. It's going to be something really stupid and pedestrian and dumb. And actually, this is really embarrassing that I didn't think about until right now. I have actually broke my ankle in a gopher hole before.
See, that's what I'm telling you. Gopher holes
They're my
are
undoing.
what you really have to look out for.
Waterfalls, totally okay. I climbed a mountain with my kid this summer. Fine. Like really, really super steep descents. Cool. Gopher holes on the prairie. Gonna do me in.
All right, well, let's get out of this episode. We got to install a tracker on you to make sure the proper authorities are alerted if you fall in a gopher hole.
That's probably smart. That would be a good investment.
Well, that was our episode. Thanks as always for tuning in to Travel Tomorrow. Join us every 2 weeks for stories about what's new and what's next in travel. Next, we'll be discussing Native American tourism just in time for Thanksgiving. So make sure to listen to that one if all you know about Native Americans is what your second grade teacher taught you.
You can find us on social media at TravelTomPod on Twitter, TravelTomorrowPod on Facebook, or you can email us anytime at TravelTomorrowPod@gmail.com. Gracias to the Fiddle Revolt for our fabulous theme music. And please subscribe to Travel Tomorrow wherever you get your podcasts.
Gracias means thank you.
Thanks.